Hi, everyone. Steve Adubato. We kick off the program looking at the current state of the Democratic Party, the future of the Democratic Party, with two people who know the party politics pretty well. Phil Alagia, a Democratic strategist and the chief of staff in Essex County, New Jersey, and also Julie Roginsky, Democratic strategist and president of Comprehensive Communications Group. Good to see you, Phil and Julie.
Great to
see you.
We're taping this March 21st. A lot of things have been going on in the country in the next few days. Don't really know, but this will be seen later that could impact the presidential election. Julie, I want to ask you this. Joe Biden, likely to run for president. This will be seen. He may have announced by then. Who knows? By the end of the term, he'd be 82 if elected in 2024, 86. Now, I'm for people being in the business for as long as they can and being productive and useful, and I don't want to be taken off the air anytime soon. But seriously, the Democratic Party have no other candidates in the stable of candidates that Joe Biden is the candidate again? Julie, please.
Well, first of all, I think Joe Biden's done a great job as president, so I don't really care how old he is or what he does in his spare time, as long as he performs for the country. And I would challenge you to find a more effective first-term president of either party, at least in my lifetime. So I have no problem with Joe Biden's age, provided that he can keep delivering in the second term the way he delivered in the first.
So age not a factor, even if 86 on the back end of a second term, with many questioning President Biden's, I don't want to say cognitive abilities, because I'm not an expert and I'm not caring for him personally, and don't have that firsthand experience. But there are times that it looks like the president is confused as to what he's saying and where he is. And we need to be honest about that. Never picked that up, Phil?
I think it's not about age, it's about ability and capability, and he's been doing an outstanding job. He's been around the world leading the country, and if he continues to do that, he should be regarded on what he's doing, not how old he is. There's no mandatory retirement age. He'll face the voters, and they'll make a decision on whether or not they think he can lead our country. And I think he can. He's done a phenomenal job.
Interesting, because I'm curious about this, Julie. We are taping on the 21st, and we don't know if former President Trump, regardless of what he says on his social media site, is going to be arrested, indicted. Who knows? The case will play out if it happens. If, in fact, President Trump is indicted, New York, the DA, Manhattan, what are the implications from your perspective in terms of his candidacy and the way the Democrats would run against him? Because there's also a case in Georgia. There's also, there are several cases going on. Julie.
Yeah, hard to say. I mean, what he's allegedly getting indicted for, and who knows when the actual indictment comes down. But as we said here today, he's getting indicted for something that John Edwards, the former senator from North Carolina, got indicted for about a decade ago. And John Edwards hung a jury on that. So it's not clear to me that this is the strongest case against against Donald Trump. It's not clear to me that this should be the ace in the hole that Democrats have been praying for all these years. It seems to me that there are stronger cases to be made against him, whether it's the January 6th investigation that the federal government is looking into, or the Georgia interference investigation into the election outcome in Georgia that the DA prosecutor down in Fulton County, Georgia, is looking into. So it's interesting that New York is going first. And if this were the only thing to get Donald Trump on, I would say, nobody's above the law. If Phil and I did something like this, we'd probably get prosecuted. But nevertheless, I think there are stronger things to get him on, because he has been very lawless, in my view, on a whole number of issues. The Stormy Daniels hush money payoff seems to be the least of it.
But there is a danger.
Because I want to move to public policy after this. Go ahead, Phil.
There's a danger. He gets indicted and there's a hung jury. He doesn't get convicted. And then the Democrats or something, they go after him again. It's just going to be food for the Trump supporters it's a witch hunt. And I think it's only going to make his supporters more excited about going out there and reelecting him. So you should start with your strongest punch, not your weakest punch.
But Julie, on the issues, inflation, would you say inflation the number one issue in our country right now in terms of what people care about?
Pocketbook issues are always the number one issue that people care about. I think it's inflation. I suspect if I were to do a focus group or look at some polling today, as we sit here today, there's concern about what's happening with the banking system and potentially a repeat of 2008. So is it inflation? Is it recession? Is it stagflation? I don't know the answer to that. And again, a lot of this will play out before 2024 when Joe Biden and Congress have to face the voters. But as we sit here today, it's a very destabilized economic time that's creating a lot of uncertainty for both the stock market and for Main Street.
Hey, Phil.
When you look at the White House's budget, President Biden just released his budget. He talked about securing Social Security, securing Medicaid, things that are very important to the American people. The Republicans are talking about not extending the debt ceiling, but they're not offering solutions. So, if you look at the president's budget, it's very, poll tested in a good sense. It's what the American people want. So I think he's heading towards making sure Social Security, Medicaid stay intact, and that we have ways to spend down to reduce the deficit.
The Republican Party has a huge chasm, and we talked to Senator John Bramnick just earlier today in the taping. There's the moderate wing of the Republican Party, which may or may not be getting smaller and smaller. The so-called base, the Trump base, who knows, 30, 35%. There's a split going on there, and we'll see how that plays out. In the Democratic Party, Julie, is it fair to say that there is a far left, very progressive AOC wing of the party, if you will, and then mainstream moderate Democrats like President Biden, and it's very hard for them to get on the same page, Julie, on issues, on policy issues.
Yeah. I would say the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is this. The extreme wing of the Republican Party, the MAGA wing, the ultra MAGA wing, has basically hijacked the Republican Party. There are no more John Bramnicks at the national level. There just aren't. The John Bramnicks at the national level have either retired or they're voting Democrat. The reality is that the Republican Party has become the MAGA party consistently. You see that by the reaction of almost every other presidential candidate who is not really upholding the rule of law so much as defending Donald Trump, potential indictment. On the other hand, the Democratic Party has the vast majority of the Democratic Party, I believe, is mainstream. You have some extreme elements who are very loud on Twitter and on social media, but they're not really dominating the party the way that the Republicans are being dominated by these extreme MAGA zealots. And that's the difference. The difference is that the Democrats can arguably say that they are in the mainstream of where Americans are versus the Republicans who are getting ever more extreme.
Phil, and by the way, Phil works with and for a very moderate Democrat, the county executive in Essex County, Joe DiVincenzo. Please, Phil.
One of the dangers, though, Julie, is that left wing of our party is loud. They're not controlling national elections. They have an important voice in the party, but middle America hears them a lot more and are turning away from all the Democrats. I mean, we see it. We're now no longer the blue collar party. Building trade unions, blue collar workers, police and firemen are
police officers,
more
firefighters.
Republican.
Many of them vote Republican. Phil, talk about it. And many of them are friends that you and I have had for many, many years. We grew up with. They vote Republican. Please.
And I think it's because they hear that very liberal wing of the party more than they look at the actions of Biden, who has been, more. Border control, talking about more crime issues than they want to hear. But that wing of our party seems to be what's moving the middle away from. So It's a tough balance because the liberal wing of our party is very important. It's an important voice, one of many.
Phil's right, and I've consistently said that the problem with the White House, which Joe Biden is the leader of the Democratic Party, has been an awful failure to communicate. As I've said earlier, he's got a great set of accomplishments, but he hasn't communicated them well, which is why his numbers are not where they should be. Because the policy.
Hold on, Julie. What do you mean? I'm sorry for interrupting, Julie. What do you mean not? If you're clear on what it is you believe in, if you're clear on the policies that you believe need to be put forth, then what the heck is the problem communicating those things, unless you have conflicted feelings about whether you believe those things or not, or you don't really want to commit to it?
No, because of course you have to communicate it well. Just because you do something doesn't mean that your policies are getting across and that you're communicating them well. I mean, the difference between a Joe DiVincenzo, and I don't mean to tout Joe DiVincenzo here just because Phil is here, but the difference between Joe DiVincenzo and the White House is that Joe DiVincenzo does stuff as an executive and then really does a great job of talking about it and tangibly showing his voters what he does, right? The White House doesn't do that as effectively. They just pass great policies or have executive orders that are great policies, but yet don't communicate them effectively where the average American understands how this impacts them. It's one thing to say we spent X number of billions of dollars or trillions of dollars on an infrastructure plan. It's very different to say how that infrastructure plan is going to affect me in a swing district, if hypothetically in a swing district for Tom Malinowski last time around in Central Jersey.
Lost to Tom Kaine, who is now a new congressman.
Or in Bucks County in Pennsylvania. I mean, these are places that Democrats need to be competitive. And the only way to do that is to say tangibly, the reason that we passed this infrastructure plan is because X road is now going to be fixed that you've been complaining about driving over and having a blown tire for the last 10 years. Thanks to us, you don't have to do that anymore. That's the kind of communication I'm talking about. Joe by the way, Joe DiVincenzo does a great job doing that at the county level. It's much more hard to do that, obviously, at the federal level, but it needs to be done. And that's how you become a good communicator.
But even the building trades, Steve, we talked about it before. There's been no president who's been better to the building trades than Joe Biden with the infrastructure bill, with legislation that affects their pensions and they're continuing. And I would say he would lose an election if it was just among the building trades, which is crazy. And again, as to Julie's point, it's about communicating and getting your word out.
Before I let each one of you go, to those Republicans and to many who argue that January 6th was a peaceful protest, people have a right to protest. They still say that after all this time. Julie, you say to them?
I say to them, put down the crack pipe, which is Fox News and OAN and Top Radio, and look at the reality, because we're not even living in a reality-based world anymore. If all you're listening to are people like Tucker Carlson, who are effectively telling you that the sky is orange when you know it's blue, you're either going to believe your own lying eyes or you're going to believe Tucker Carlson. Right now, people are not believing their own lying eyes. They're really believing it's not even a reality that we're living in. And that's what scares me. We're no longer having debates based on the merits. We're now having debates about whether the earth is flat. And that's just a whole different universe than the one that I think all of us came up with in politics, and very frightening to me.
Final words, Phil. 30
There
seconds.
are Capitol police officers today whose families are mourning their loss because of these peaceful protests. So, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's something that hurts me to my core as an American that we, raided the Capitol and people want to say it didn't happen. But the future of the Democratic Party is bright. We have young, dynamic candidates all across the country, and we're going to have a long future leading this country.
Phil, Julie, I want to thank you so much. And again, I repeat that we're going to have a comprehensive discussion about the future of the Republican Party as well. Phil, Julie, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks, Julie.
You guys stay with us. We'll be right back.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by Holy Name, Seton Hall University, PSC&G, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, NJM Insurance Group, New Jersey Sharing Network, Delta Dental of New Jersey, Wells Fargo, and by the Adler Aphasia Center. Promotional support provided by NJ.com and by New Jersey Globe.
Hello, I'm Dr. Luke Ironman, a family medicine specialist at Holy Name. When was your last visit to your primary care doctor? Throughout the pandemic, many patients have put off their annual physicals and screenings, but preventative health care is critical for early detection of illnesses and to avoid future health problems. Your doctor can also help you develop a wellness plan to achieve your personal health goals. Your health can't wait. Be proactive and talk to your primary care doctor today about scheduling your annual physical.